Arav's breath stopped. Everything slowed down, and they were both in that room. Alone, they were entangled in something huge, something he had never imagined. He couldn't hide it any longer. Tension was building between the two of them. There was something between them that was evidence, something raw, but dangerous too. Arav turned his face a little to the other side, then faced Raghav's eyes. Raghav raised his hand and gently touched Arav's jaw. His touch was light, but so powerful that an electric shock was felt inside Arav. Unknowingly, Arav closed his eyes. His heart was beating fast. "I don't know what this is, Raghav," he said. His voice had that vulnerability that was showing his calm exterior. Welcome to Pranav Fictitious Story. Before starting today's story, we would like to make a small request to you. Please subscribe to our new channel and support us. Your support will inspire us to bring more original and unique stories. So let's start today's story without delay. The next day, Arav and Raghav were getting ready for their final meeting. Despite the professional environment, their feelings were still simmering beneath the surface. When the meeting ended, their client invited them to a celebratory dinner because it was an important gesture to solidify the business relationship. The restaurant was a luxurious rooftop venue where you could get a breathtaking view of the city. Throughout the evening, Arav was more aware of Raghav's presence and gaze. Every glance, every subtle touch seemed to be charged with a deeper meaning. Raghav, like always, was ensuring that Arav felt comfortable, but his lingering gazes were saying everything. When dinner was over, the client said goodbye to them. Arav and Raghav were left alone again. The night air was crisp, and the city lights were shining like stars. They both went to the edge of the rooftop, leaning on the railing, enjoying the view. Raghav's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" Arav looked at him and said, "Of course." Raghav's gaze was intense, full of emotions. "Do you ever think that if we stop holding ourselves back, if we just feel our feelings?" Arav gulped in tension. He had thought about it many times, but he didn't want to admit it. The fear of that unknown feeling of what it could do to him and his life was stopping him. He said in tension, "Yes, no, no, this seems scary. I don't want what's between us to end." Raghav shook his head, thinking, "I understand, but sometimes I feel maybe we're missing something amazing just because we're afraid of taking a chance." Raghav's sincere words stirred something in Arav. He knew Raghav was right, but the uncertainty was still heavy. "Maybe until we try, how will we know?" Raghav said. His voice was no more than a whisper. Raghav took a step forward, his hand brushing Arav's arm. That touch was gentle, but it felt like an electric current passed between them. A spark ignited. Arav's breath stopped, his pulse increased. Raghav's eyes were soft, and for a moment everything in the background faded. It was just the two of them, standing under the stars on a rooftop in a moment that couldn't be ignored anymore. Arav's heart was beating fast when Raghav put his hand on his face and his fingers gently touched his lips. Arav then touched his cheeks, removing a lock from his hair. That simple touch felt so intimate, so raw, as if Raghav had been waiting for it for a long time. For a moment, he stood there without saying a word. The tension between them was palpable, full of longing and desire, but there was a limit between them, which neither of them wanted to break. Arav tried to steady his breath. "Raghav, me." But Raghav didn't let him finish. He leaned a little, his lips were right next to Arav's ears. That closeness was sending a shiver through Arav's spine. "You don't have to say anything, Arav," Raghav whispered. "I know, those words, that tone, that closeness, everything was enough." Raghav didn't have to say much. Arav was feeling everything. The weight of unspoken words, the pull between them, which had been growing for a long time. Raghav took a step back. Both looked into each other's eyes. That moment was intense, but he didn't try to go any further. He was understanding Arav's hesitation. But Arav was now feeling an undeniable truth that was between the two of them. "Good night, Arav," Raghav said softly, touching Arav's face. His voice was filled with emotions. Arav looked at him for a moment. He felt the heaviness of whatever he had shared. Good night, Raghav," he replied. His voice was low, but it was trembling. His heart was still in racing mode. When Raghav left, Arav stood there. His mind was surrounded by whirlwinds of emotions, confusion, uncertainty, desire. Everything was tangled inside him. That evening, in the luxurious hotel suite, there was a strange silence between Arav and Raghav. but there was also a strange magnetic pull between them. Their business trip was successful, but between them it had become a little too complex. Raghav's gaze was constantly moving towards Arav when he was looking at the documents. Every word, every gaze that was exchanged between them was filled with a heavy tension, attraction, and desire. But looking at Raghav, it felt like he was lost in Arav's love. Arav felt that Raghav was looking at him, and for a few moments he began to feel a little suffocate. At first, everything was so subtle. A small glimpse, everything began to feel like magic. The way Raghav was looking at him, it was deep, dangerous, and magnetic. His pulse began to accelerate, but Arav tried his best to ignore it. He focused on the papers, but it was impossible. The silence between them was as intense as the weather before a storm. Raghav slowly moved forward in a deliberate manner. Every step he took towards Arav seemed as if he was trying to bring him close to him without touching him. His presence was so overwhelming that Arav could feel it from a distance. Raghav said, his voice was light but deep and intense. Arav looked up. It was a long day, he replied, trying to make his more stable. But Raghav began to take another step forward. You should rest. His words were soft, but there was something in them, something that Arav could not understand, but which was forcing his heart to beat faster. Arav tried to collect himself, but Raghav's presence felt like a weight. He was not speaking much, but his pulse was magnetic. His presence, his scent, and the way his eyes were looking into Arav's eyes. You are very close, Raghav. Arav gathered his courage and said, worried about showing his emotions. Close? Raghav repeated. There was a slight smile on his lips. It was a dangerous smile, which was sending Arav a shiver. Arav's heart was beating fast, and for the first time he questioned the space between them. Is this too much or too little? Raghav's eyes were deep, and he took another step forward. His breath was now right next to Arav's ears. Tell me, Arav, he said softly. His voice had an intensity that was giving Arav an electric shock. Do you also feel this? This tension? Whenever I come to you, right? Arav's breath stopped. Everything slowed down, and they were only in that room. Alone, they were entangled in something very big, which he had not even thought of. He could not hide it any longer. The tension was building between them. There was something between them, which was evidence, something raw, but also dangerous. Arav turned his face a little to the other side, and then faced Raghav's eyes. Raghav raised his hand, and he gently touched Arav's jaw. His touch was light, but so powerful that an electric shock was being felt inside Arav. Unknowingly, Arav closed his eyes. His heart was beating fast. I don't know what this is, Raghav, he said. His voice had that vulnerability that was showing his calm exterior. You don't need to know. Raghav answered in a soft voice. His thumb, passing through Arav's jaw, slowly traced on his face. Then he took his face to Arav's ear. His lips gently touched Arav's ear, and Raghav said, But I know. And in that moment, the world outside the room seemed to disappear. That tension was not just a question, it had become an answer. And when they met their eyes, something happened between them that was difficult to describe in words. It was getting dark, and the city lights were shining like the stars outside the hotel suite. The room was dim, only the soft light of the bedside lamp and the reflection of the city from the floor-to-ceiling windows could be seen. Arav was lying on his bed in the hotel room. His eyes were closed, but his sleep was far from it. All he could think about was Raghav. His touch, the impact of his words, and the tension that was building up in the last few days was still the same, or was increasing, which was becoming difficult to control. His heart was beating fast. Every time he remembered Raghav's closeness, it was as if he had become a part of every space, as if Raghav's presence had become a part of Arav's every breath. A slight touch of his fingers on Arav's face, and his voice, which was in the air for a long time. But now there was no space between the two, and nothing between them, but the tension was just as much. Arav felt a little uncomfortable and tried to get his thoughts out of his head. He got up from his bed, ruffled his hair, and tried to focus on his phone. But nothing was working. No emails, no messages. His mind was just thinking about Raghav. Then a slight knock at the door. Arav froze a little, his heart skipped a beat. Now, who could it be? As long as he thought, the door slowly opened, and Raghav was standing there, leaning near the door frame. His salute was hidden in the soft light of the hallway. Arav felt his pulse increasing rapidly when he saw him. Raghav? His voice, a little tense, was restless. Raghav didn't answer immediately. He just stood there looking at Arav's eyes with intensity. I can't sleep, he finally said, entering the room. I thought, I'll talk to you. There's no problem. Arav shook his head. Yes. Raghav closed the door and slowly put his feet in the room. As he moved forward, his presence was felt even more in the room. He stood near the bed, Arav's clothes. There was only a deep silence in the room. Arav held his breath. Raghav's presence was close, so close that Arav could feel his warm breath on his skin. The space between them was filled with a silence so heavy, it almost spoke. Is everything okay? Raghav's voice was soft, almost hesitant, like he was waiting for something unspoken to emerge. Arav didn't reply immediately. His eyes dropped to the bed, and he exhaled slowly. I don't know, he whispered. Raghav, now seated on the couch, looked at him with an unreadable gaze. Mischief danced in his eyes, but there was something deeper too. The silence stretched, and the air between them grew denser. You know, Arav, Raghav said finally, his voice low, deliberate, it's impossible to ignore you. Arav's eyes widened. His heart began to race, but he remained quiet, caught between confusion and curiosity. Raghav leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. You're different, he continued, and I've never been able to understand why, but I've always felt it. Arav could feel his breath quickening. Something inside him was shifting. The space between them no longer felt empty, it felt charged. Raghav stood up and slowly walked toward him. Their eyes locked. But there's one thing I do know for sure, he said, his voice softer now. As Raghav came closer, Arav's heartbeat grew louder in his chest. There was no distance now. Raghav gently brushed a strand of hair from Arav's forehead, his touch light, lingering, almost reverent. I love you, he said, clearly and softly. I really do. Arav's breath caught. His mind was whirling, but somewhere in the storm, those words found a place. Just then, as if fate had its own plans, the door opened. Arav flinched and pulled back instinctively. The moment shattered like glass. Sorry, Arav, I didn't mean to interrupt, came Karan's voice from the doorway. Both Arav and Raghav quickly composed themselves. Emotions masked, silence reshaped. It's fine, Karan, Arav said, trying to steady his voice. What happened? Karan paused, hesitant. His eyes flickered between them. He had come for a reason, but his expression hid it. Deep down, something unsettled him about seeing Arav with Raghav. I just missed you, Karan said. You're important to me. Arav looked down, uncertain. His heart felt torn, pulled in directions he couldn't understand. The tension that lingered now had a new shape, and with it, the story of all three hearts began to change.